The hospital letter trembled in Ethan's hands, its edges fraying like his hope. At 16, he'd memorized every word of the diagnosis: severe scoliosis. Surgery recommended. A chance at a life without pain. But his parents' voices still echoed in his head, sharp as broken glass. We can't afford it. Ethan. Not for you. He stood on the cracked sidewalk outside their small, Ohio home, staring at the new puppy in his sister Lily's arms. The dog, a golden retriever with a red bow, yipped happily, oblivious to the storm brewing in Ethan's chest. Lily, 12 and beaming, didn't notice the way their parents' eyes lingered on her. Their normal child, while Ethan's curved spine made him invisible. He wasn't angry at Lily, she was just a kid. After all, but the unfairness burned. His back ached constantly, a reminder of the weight he carried, not just in his bones, but in his heart. Ethan had always known he was different, not just because of his scoliosis, but because of the secret he'd buried deep. He was gay, and in a town like theirs, that was a sin worse than any physical flaw. The puppy squirmed, and Lily giggled, her voice slicing through Ethan's thoughts. Isn't she perfect? Ethan. Mom and Dad said she's my reward for getting straight A's. Her innocence stung, and Ethan forced a smile, his jaw tight. He wanted to scream that he'd been begging for surgery for years, that his grades were just as good, that he was trying so hard to be enough. But he didn't. He never did. Instead, he turned away, his sneakers scuffing the pavement as he walked toward the community center. It was the only place in town where he felt marginally safe, where the weight of his parents' expectations didn't crush him. The center hosted a weekly art club, a haven for misfits like him. There, he could sketch his dream cities far from Ohio, where he could stand tall, love freely, and breathe without pain. Inside the center, the air smelled of paint and old coffee. Ethan slid into a chair at the back, his sketchbook open before the session even started. That's when he saw Caleb for the first time. Caleb was new, a transfer from Chicago, with a leather jacket and eyes that seemed to see through walls. He sat across from Ethan, sketching with quick, confident strokes, his dark hair falling over his forehead. Ethan's heart stuttered, not just from the pain in his back, but from something new, something terrifying and electric. Caleb caught him staring and smirked, a lopsided grin that made Ethan's cheeks burn. You're good, Caleb said, nodding at Ethan's half-finished sketch of a city skyline. But you look like you're carrying the whole world on your shoulders. Ethan froze, unsure if Caleb meant his spine or something deeper. He mumbled a reply, but Caleb's words lingered, a spark in the dark. For the first time in years, Ethan felt seen not as a broken body or a shameful secret, but as himself. The art club ended too soon, and Ethan lingered, hoping Caleb would say more. He didn't, but as they packed up, Caleb brushed past him, close enough that Ethan caught the scent of his cologne. See you next week. Curly, Caleb said, his voice teasing but kind. Ethan's heart raced. No one had ever given him a nickname before. That night, Ethan lay in bed, his back throbbing, the hospital letter hidden under his pillow. He thought of Caleb's grin, the way it felt like a promise of something better. But the weight of his parents' words pressed harder. Lily's our priority. She's normal. Ethan clenched his fists, vowing to find a way to fix his spine and maybe, just maybe, to find the courage to be himself. He didn't know it yet, but Caleb would be the key to both. Over the next few weeks, the community center became Ethan's lifeline. Every Wednesday, he'd rush through dinner, ignoring his parents' pointed comments about his posture, and bike to the art club. Caleb was always there, his presence like a magnet, pulling Ethan out of his shell. They started talking small things at first, like favorite artists or music, but soon it was deeper, dreams, fears, the weight of being different in a town that demanded sameness. Caleb was open in a way Ethan envied. He spoke casually about being gay, about the fights he'd had with his own parents before they moved to Ohio. "They're trying," Caleb said one evening, his pencil pausing over a sketch of a phoenix. "But it's hard when they don't get it." Ethan nodded, his throat tight. He hadn't told Caleb about his own secret yet, but every time their eyes met, he felt the truth clawing its way out. At home, things grew worse. The puppy, named Daisy, was Lily's constant companion, and Ethan's parents doted on her every whim. Ethan's requests for surgery were met with sighs and excuses. "Insurance won't cover it. We're saving for Lily's college." One night, his father snapped, "Why can't you just deal with it, Ethan? Not everything's about you." The words cut deeper than any scalpel could. Ethan started researching on his own, sneaking onto the family computer late at night. He found a foundation that offered grants for medical procedures, but the application was daunting: pages of forms, essays, and a deadline looming in 2 months. He needed support, someone to believe in him. He thought of Caleb. One rainy afternoon, Ethan found Caleb alone in the art room, working on a mural for the center's fundraiser. The theme was hope, and Caleb's design was a vibrant explosion of color birds breaking free from cages, hands reaching for stars. Ethan hesitated, then blurted, "I need surgery. For my spine. My parents won't help, but there's this grant." Caleb listened, his eyes steady, not a trace of pity. When Ethan finished, Caleb set down his paintbrush and said, "Let's do it. I'll help you with the application." Ethan's heart swelled, but doubt crept in. Why would Caleb care? What did he see in a kid like Ethan, hunched and scared? They spent hours together, drafting essays and gathering documents. Caleb's confidence was contagious, and for the first time, Ethan felt like his dream of surgery wasn't impossible. But it wasn't just the application that drew them closer. Late nights at the center turned into walks home, then stolen moments by the river, where Caleb admitted he liked Ethan not just as a friend. Ethan's world tilted. He'd never let himself imagine someone like Caleb could want him. But fear kept him silent. If he told Caleb he felt the same, it would mean admitting who he was not just to Caleb, but to himself. And in a town where different meant wrong, that felt like stepping off a cliff. Still, Caleb didn't push. He just stayed close, his hand brushing Ethan's as they worked, his laughter easing the ache in Ethan's back. By the time they submitted the grant application, Ethan was falling not just for Caleb, but for the version of himself he saw reflected in Caleb's eyes: strong, worthy, whole. But at home, the puppy chewed Ethan's shoes, and his parents' voices grew colder. One night, Lily overheard them talking about sending Ethan to a camp to fix him. She told Ethan in tears, and the betrayal hit like a punch. His parents didn't even know he was gay, but they sensed he wasn't normal. Ethan realized he couldn't wait for their approval. He had to fight for himself. Caleb was his anchor, but the storm was coming. The grant application was a lifeline, but it wasn't a guarantee. Ethan checked his email obsessively, jumping at every notification. Caleb kept him grounded, dragging him to coffee shops or the library to distract him. One afternoon, as they sat by the river, Caleb tossed a pebble into the water and said, "You ever think about leaving this place?" Ethan's heart raced. All the time. Somewhere big, like New York or San Francisco, where I could be me. He stopped short, afraid he'd said too much. Caleb just smiled, his eyes soft. "I'd go with you," he said, and Ethan's breath caught. It wasn't a promise. Not yet, but it felt like one. At home, tension thickened. Ethan's parents noticed his late nights and started asking questions. "Who's this Caleb kid?" his mother demanded one evening, her eyes narrowing. Ethan mumbled something about art club, but his father's silence was worse suspicious. Heavy. Lily, sensing the shift, started leaving Daisy in Ethan's room, as if the puppy could bridge the gap between them. But Ethan couldn't shake the memory of his parents' talk about fixing him. One night, he found a flyer slipped under his Dora Church pamphlet about healing camps for troubled teens. His stomach churned. He confronted Lily, who admitted she'd overheard their parents again. "They're scared, Ethan," she whispered. "They think you're different." Ethan's chest tightened. He hadn't come out, but his parents' judgment was already closing in. He told Caleb everything the next day, his voice shaking. Caleb's jaw clenched, but he didn't interrupt. When Ethan finished, Caleb pulled him into a hug, fierce and protective. "You're not broken," Caleb said. "And you're not alone." Ethan wanted to believe him, but fear gnawed at him. What if the grant didn't come through? What if his parents sent him away before he could escape? The art club's fundraiser was approaching, a chance to raise money for the community center and, Ethan hoped, for himself. Caleb suggested they sell prints of their sketches, including Ethan's cityscapes and Caleb's Phoenix mural. The idea terrified Ethan. His art was personal, a window into his soul, but Caleb's enthusiasm was infectious. "People will see you," Caleb said. "The real you." The fundraiser was a whirlwind. The community center buzzed with locals, some curious, others judgmental. Ethan's parents showed up, their faces tight with disapproval, but Lily dragged them to Ethan's booth, proudly pointing out his sketches. For a moment, Ethan felt a flicker of hope until his father muttered, "This doesn't change anything." Caleb overheard and stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "Ethan's talented, and he's fighting for something you should care about." The room went quiet, and Ethan's heart pounded. His parents left without a word, but Caleb's defense lit a fire in Ethan. He wasn't invisible anymore. That night, an email arrived. The Grant Foundation had shortlisted Ethan's application. He needed to attend an interview in Columbus, a 3-hour drive. Ethan's excitement crashed when he realized he couldn't ask his parents for help. But Caleb didn't hesitate. "I'll drive you," he said. "We'll make it happen." As they planned the trip, Ethan felt the weight of his secret pressing harder. He wanted to tell Caleb he loved him, but the words stuck. The interview was his chance at a new life, but admitting his feelings felt like an even bigger risk. The drive to Columbus was Ethan's first taste of freedom. Caleb's beat-up sedan rattled along the highway, the radio playing soft indie tunes. Ethan stared out the window, the Ohio fields blurring into a green haze. His stomach knotted with nerves. The interview was tomorrow, but tonight, it was just him and Caleb, away from the suffocating weight of home. They checked into a cheap motel, splitting the cost with money from the fundraiser. Caleb sprawled on one of the twin beds, sketching in his notebook, while Ethan paced, rehearsing answers. "You've got this," Caleb said, his voice steady. "They'll see how much you need this." Ethan wanted to believe him, but doubt crept in. What if he wasn't enough? That night, unable to sleep, Ethan sat on the balcony, staring at the city lights. Caleb joined him, their shoulders brushing. "What's really scaring you?" Caleb asked. Ethan's throat tightened. He wanted to say the truth he'd hidden for years, but fear held him back. Instead, he said, "What if I get the surgery and I'm still me?" Caleb's eyes softened. "You're already enough, Ethan. Surgery or not." He reached for Ethan's hand, and the world stopped. Ethan's heart pounded, and before he could think, He leaned in, kissing Caleb. It was clumsy, desperate, but Caleb kissed him back, and for the first time, Ethan felt whole. The next morning, the interview went better than Ethan expected. The Foundation's panel asked about his scoliosis, his dreams, his struggles. Ethan spoke from the heart, his voice steady as he described the pain, the rejection, the hope he clung to. Caleb waited outside, and when Ethan emerged, beaming, Caleb pulled him into a hug. "Told you," he whispered. On the drive back, Ethan felt lighter, not just from the interview, but from the kiss. He and Caleb didn't talk about it, but the air between them hummed with possibility. When they stopped for gas, Caleb bought Ethan a cheap keychain, a tiny skyline of Columbus. "For your future," he said, and Ethan's chest ached with gratitude. But home loomed like a storm cloud. When Ethan walked through the door, his parents were waiting. His mother held the church pamphlet, her face pale. "We found this in your room," she said. "And we know about Caleb." Ethan's blood ran cold. Lily stood in the corner, tears in her eyes, Daisy whimpering at her feet. "We're sending you to camp," his father said. "You need to be fixed." Ethan's world crumbled. He looked at Lily, hoping for an ally, but she looked away, guilt written across her face. The puppy barked, and Ethan realized he was alone again. He ran to his room, locking the door, his mind racing. The grant wasn't guaranteed, and now his parents were closing in. He texted Caleb, his hands shaking. "They know. They're sending me away." Caleb's reply came instantly. "Meet me at the river. We'll figure this out." Ethan grabbed his sketchbook and the hospital letter, sneaking out through the window. The night air was cold, but Caleb was waiting, his face fierce with determination. "You're not going to that camp," he said. "We'll find another way." The riverbank was their sanctuary, the water reflecting the stars like scattered dreams. Ethan told Caleb everything: the pamphlet, the camp, the suffocating fear. Caleb listened, his hand steady on Ethan's shoulder. "We'll leave," Caleb said. "If the grant comes through, we'll go somewhere they can't touch you." It was a reckless plan, but Ethan clung to it. They spent the night plotting, sketching a future in a city where Ethan could get surgery, where they could be together without fear. Caleb's confidence was a lifeline, but doubt gnawed at Ethan. He was still a minor, and his parents' control felt inescapable. The next day, Ethan avoided home, staying at the community center with Caleb. They worked on a new mural, a defiant declaration of freedom, two figures holding hands, silhouetted against a blazing sunrise. Locals stopped by, some praising the art, others whispering about those boys. Ethan felt the stares but refused to hide. Caleb's hand brushed his, and he didn't pull away. At school, things unraveled. A group of jocks cornered Ethan in the hallway, their taunts cutting deep. "Heard you're going to freak camp," one sneered. Ethan's face burned, but before he could respond, Caleb appeared, shoving the leader back. "Back off," Caleb growled, and the jocks retreated. But the damage was done. Rumors spread, and by lunch, Ethan felt like the whole town knew. Lily found him after school, her eyes red. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't mean to tell them about Caleb." Ethan's heart sank. He wanted to be angry, but Lily was just a kid, caught in their parents' web. He hugged her, Daisy squirming between them, and promised to fix things. But how? That night, an email arrived. The grant was approved. Ethan would get his surgery, fully funded, in 6 weeks. He called Caleb, his voice breaking with relief. They met at the river, laughing and crying, the keychain dangling from Ethan's pocket. But the joy was short-lived. His parents were waiting when he got home, their faces like stone. "You're not going," his father said. "We've signed you up for the camp. It starts next week." Ethan's blood boiled. He'd fought too hard for this, his surgery, his truth, his love for Caleb. "I'm not going," he said, his voice steady for the first time. "I'm getting the surgery, and I'm leaving." His mother gasped, but his father's face darkened. "You're our son," he said. "You'll do what we say?" Ethan stood tall, despite the pain in his spine. "Not anymore," he said, and walked out. He spent the night at Caleb's, his heart racing with fear and freedom. Caleb's parents, though hesitant, agreed to let him stay until the surgery. But Ethan knew this was only the beginning. He had to face his parents one last time, and he needed Lily on his side. Ethan spent the next week at Caleb's, sleeping on a cot in the basement. Caleb's parents were kind but wary, unsure about harboring a runaway. Ethan didn't care he was free, at least for now. The surgery was scheduled in Columbus, and Caleb promised to be there, no matter what. But Ethan couldn't stop thinking about Lily. She'd texted him, begging him to come home, saying their parents were furious but missed him. He knew she was torn, caught between loyalty to him and their parents' control. He had to talk to her, to make her understand. He met Lily at the park, Daisy bounding around her feet. "They're wrong about you," Lily said, tears streaming. "But they're my parents too." Ethan knelt, ignoring the pain in his back, and took her hands. "You don't have to choose," he said. "Just help me get through this." Lily nodded, promising to keep his plan secret. The surgery loomed, but so did the threat of the camp. Ethan's parents had called the police, claiming he was a runaway. Caleb's parents convinced the officers to let Ethan stay until the surgery, citing the grant and his medical needs. But the tension was suffocating. Ethan felt like he was running out of time. At the community center, the mural was nearly complete. Ethan and Caleb poured their hearts into it, adding details that told their story. Two boys, hands clasped, standing tall despite the world's weight. The final art club meeting was bittersweet. Locals admired the mural, but whispers about Ethan and Caleb grew louder. One woman, a church friend of Ethan's parents, confronted them. "You're leading him astray," she told Caleb. Ethan stepped forward, his voice firm. "He's saving me." The night before the surgery, Ethan and Caleb sat by the river, the keychain heavy in Ethan's pocket. "I love you," Ethan said, the words finally free. Caleb grinned, pulling him close. "Took you long enough," he teased, but his kiss said everything. The next morning, they drove to Columbus, Lily sneaking along to say goodbye. She hugged Ethan tightly, Daisy licking his hand. "You'll be okay," she whispered, and Ethan believed her. At the hospital, Caleb held his hand until the nurses wheeled him away. As the anesthesia took hold, Ethan's last thought was of Caleb's smile, the promise of a new life waiting on the other side. The surgery was a success, but recovery was brutal. Ethan woke in a haze of pain, his back braced, his body weak. Caleb was there, sneaking in sketches to make him laugh, while Lily sent photos of Daisy to cheer him up. His parents hadn't visited, but Ethan wasn't surprised. He'd made his choice, and so had they. Weeks later, Ethan stood straighter, the pain fading with each physical therapy session. He and Caleb moved into a small apartment in Columbus, funded by the grant's leftover stipend. It wasn't much, but it was their space where Ethan could heal, physically and emotionally. Caleb got a job at an art supply store, while Ethan started community college, studying graphic design. Lily visited when she could, sneaking away from home. She told Ethan their parents were softening, starting to question their choices. But he wasn't ready to forgive. Not yet. He focused on his new life, on the love he'd found with Caleb, on the strength he'd discovered in himself. One spring day, Ethan and Caleb returned to the community center to unveil the mural officially. The crowd was small but warm, and Lily was there, beaming with pride. The mural, two boys, hands clasped, against a blazing sunrise felt like a testament to everything Ethan had overcome. He caught Caleb's eye, and they shared a smile, the keychain still in Ethan's pocket, a reminder of their journey. As they stood together, Ethan realized he'd found what he'd always wanted, not just a straight spine, but a life where he could stand tall as himself. His parents' rejection still stung, but it no longer defined him. He had Caleb, Lily, and a future he'd fought for, one where love and courage outweighed fear. And somewhere, in a small Ohio town, a puppy named Daisy barked happily, a symbol of a family that might one day heal, just as Ethan had.